Sweet. No, thank you everybody for coming out this week. Yeah, come in close. We're not scary.
Awesome. Yeah.
Excellent. So this week we have a workshop on digital security and cybersecurity from Boniface Ushaka. Thank you so much for coming out. I think small but mighty today. So I think thank you for making the trip out to come see us. Big thanks to you coming out from Parapara. So I think we'll just turn over to you and kick into it.
Cool. Thank you guys, and thanks for having me, Eddie and the rest of the ESCOs. This is my first time here, so it's really lovely to be with you guys. And today I'm hoping that we're going to learn a thing or two. Most of what we're going to talk about you already know, but it's good to sort of discuss, right? To especially look at it in the New Zealand context and what we're talking about. And more so because hopefully you take one or two things out of here that's going to help other people as well, because it's all about the awareness, right? So again, I'm really honored to be here, and this is my space. I love talking about privacy, and so it's something that I'm hoping that, like I said, we're going to learn a thing or two. So I'm not sure if you can see that. Is it possible to turn off some of the lights? Awesome. So this is going to be, look, it's going to be conversational. I'm not a lecturer, right? So we're going to just discuss. So feel free to stop me at any time to ask a question or to make a contribution, right? Just feel free to go with it and with the flow. But today, I'm hoping that we will talk through some of the things you have on the screen there. So introduction to privacy. When Wallace first contacted me that he wanted me to talk about cyber safety, and I'm like, what topical issue to talk about than privacy? Because, privacy is now the new, can I say the new sexy? Privacy is now the new in thing for cyber. And if you understand privacy really, I think you really understand a lot more about cybersecurity. And we're going to talk more about that as we go along. But I also want to touch on why privacy is important for cybersecurity. Because I know that sometimes, or most times when people think about cybersecurity, it's always about, maybe a hacker somewhere doing some stuff, or trying to break into a system and all of that. But hopefully at the end of today's presentation, you're going to know that you actually have a lot of power and you influence your cyber safety as much as, the bad guys out there. So it's about empowerment. It's about helping you to understand the tools that you have to be able to keep yourself safe. Because we're in New Zealand, and this is also sort of trending, because it only became a thing about 2-3 years ago, the New Zealand Privacy Act 2020. I thought we would talk about it as well. A lot of people don't know about the Act, but the Act is very important because it gives you, or it gives us, a lot of powers to be able to sort of protect our privacy and what we need to know from a privacy perspective. And in the Act is sort of some privacy principles that can be eschewed from, the Act, and I'm going to talk to some of those today. And then I thought we would end with a practical case of, why is privacy actually important? I mean, there's so many case studies out there. If you just do a quick Google search, you would see a lot of scary stuff out there. But we would probably just focus on the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, and all of the things I'm going to say today is in the public domain already, so you can always have a look for yourself. But because this is not a lecture, so I'm hoping that right in the middle of the presentation we're going to have some discussions as well, right? So on your decks you've got, on your tables you've got some papers and post-it, so you're going to have, we're going to do some exercise as we go along. Right, so a little bit about me. Don't bother with all of that on the slides. Just that I've been around for a couple of years in this space, and I've mostly worked in government agencies and in the public sector. So even when I was doing stuff with the private sector, I was always working for government agencies. I know we were making the joke earlier on, Eddie, that if you're in Wellington, either you're working for the government or you're working for a company that works for the government. So that's the way we roll, right? So I mainly consult in cybersecurity, and but I do have a very keen interest in supporting organizations to achieve their digital strategy or digital transformation, digital maturity, whatnot. So in the space of digital transformation, I'm very keen in uplifting capability as well. So how do agencies achieve their digital transformation outcomes? And that is directly tied to my PhD research, because I'm looking at digital leadership in the public sector, which actually makes it interesting. I have a master's in government, or what you might now know as digital government, and I do have a couple of degrees in theology and a couple of industry certifications as well. One of which is the Certified Information Privacy Technology, so hence my interest in privacy. You can forget about everything I just said.
No.
All right, so I thought we would just probably, I don't know how we're going to do this for time, but probably just go around and just tell us about yourself, especially if you're new here, this is your first time being here, hopefully not like me. And then just what you do, if you feel comfortable, just so we can get to know each other a little bit more. Is that okay? So can we take a minute or two and just go around and just say, hi, my name is this, and this is what I do for a living.
Will you start with me?
Yes.
I was just like, I just thought about to me. Hi everyone.
And sorry, tell us what you know about privacy, just in one sentence.
Man. Okay, that's a good one. My name is Boniface Ushaka. As he said, if you live in Wellington, you either work for the government or you work for an organization that works for the government. So I interestingly I work for the government. And what do I know about privacy? I just need to keep, I would say, personal information or confidential information private. I don't know how, but maybe that's
an
how
excellent start. Thank you.
Nice
Thanks,
to meet
Natalie.
everyone. It's actually my first time here, and it's interesting. I was saying to, when I got in, I was saying, how do we manage to get this kind of big space? And I was discussing with Dr. Wallace, saying that I think if we have this kind of big space and we have this kind of great person come to speak to us, we need to look for some conscious way of filling this space up. Because I think what we're going to learn from what I've heard so far, I think is invaluable.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Akli.
Yeah, my name is François Bernard. For those who don't know me, that I'm sure most people know me. I'm the loudest here. All right, what do? I live in Wellington right now. Not really any permanent job, but I do most of community work for my Rwandese community in Wellington, and ACCW is a broadcaster.
Yes.
Yeah, and what do I know about privacy? Nothing, to be honest, because for me, really, I used to think there was privacy, and right now, you're a guy who did theology, maybe you can agree with me. I no longer believe in that. So that's why I kind of live my life. What you see is what it is. Of course, I think privacy will also mean things that I would like to keep to myself and not to disclose to the rest of the world.
Awesome.
So that's my understanding of it.
Oh, that's a very solid understanding, and we're going to unpack that a little bit as we go along. Yes, sir?
Okay, my name is Manuel, or you can just call me Dolox. I'm a student, I'm a PhD student in Victoria University, studying metrology, geophysics, oceanography. So
all the big words. You're studying all the big words.
Yeah, that's mixing everything together.
Must be from Nigeria.
So what did I know about privacy? I think is individual information that is not supposed to be known to the public. Yeah, but it can be known to some kind of governmental organization, but shouldn't be shouldn't be available publicly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think by the time we get around the table, we probably will finish the presentation. Everything I had to say. That was excellent. Thank you.
My name is Elma, and I currently work at Ubuntu School. I'm part of the learning support team. And to do with privacy, it is quite important in teaching to maintain those confidentiality issues.
Awesome.
Because the child has a right, the parents,
Absolutely.
the family has a right, everybody has a right.
Yeah.
We are very conscious about that
Absolutely.
aspect of things.
Especially when it comes to minors and people who don't have a voice for themselves.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I work for the Ministry of Education, working on the New Zealand Refresh project team. What do I know about privacy? I suppose just about confidentiality, and I think just what others have said in the room, and things you're not wanting to have out in the public sphere.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My name is Kendiel. I'm originally from Eritrea, and I just recently graduated from Victoria.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And what I know about privacy is probably it has been already covered, but one thing I know is like it's becoming very concerning with the development of technology nowadays. Yeah. And I'm glad we're here to learn about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is exactly what you said. It's absolutely more concerning now because we're giving people a lot of the tools to do stuff, but not necessarily the knowledge to be able to do the right stuff, right? So thank you. Eddie.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Eddie. I work for the Ministry of Social Development. So kind of that's kind of informs most of what I know about privacy is coming through obviously MSD with like work and income and that sort of things has a lot of stuff around Privacy Act, but it's mostly just whatever I get an update every 6 months, be like update your knowledge on the Privacy Act. That's been about that for me.
Absolutely. Government agencies do that a lot. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Joahid. I am a counselor, so I know a little bit about privacy and confidentiality. It is important to let the person or the client that you're dealing with, let them know what you are talking about might not go public, and anything should not be published about anyone without their consent.
Absolutely.
So confidentiality is very important.
Yeah, you touched on consent, which is a very key ingredient in privacy. So thanks.
Yeah, you should have
Awesome.
consent.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Hi everyone, my name is Judah.
A superstar.
Not a superstar, yeah. I originally come from Botswana, been here in New Zealand almost 19 years now. I work in the community development sector, and I'm also a researcher in inter-ethnic relations. And about privacy, I don't know much apart from my understanding is the idea that there's information that's private and that shouldn't be public and that should be protected and kept confidential.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, Kosan.
Oh yeah. Okay, you said. Okay, my name is Kosam. I'm the president of ACCW, and I do a lot of things. So. My day job, the one that gives me the most money, is I'm a principal advisor in anything to do with project management in government. So,
awesome, thank you for
in
that.
short, about privacy, I'll just sum it up like it's protecting people's identity, and everything that goes with it is to do with that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so very much. And like I said, look, we've covered most of what I want to talk today, so that's a good start. Do you just want to get me on the clock? Yes, so yes, right. So,
Wallace?
Oh, okay.
You didn't tell us who.
Oh, Wallace, yes. Thank you, Kosan.
I'm the man behind the camera. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Wallace. I'm the secretary of ACCW. My regular day job, I'm a senior lecturer at Victoria University. So in terms of privacy so I think for us it's borders around confidentiality of student data and things about any processes involving a student. So we're not really allowed to share that out. Then also on the personal level, I'm a bit concerned about information that people can use to what they call it, clone your identity. So identity theft.
So that's the word. So I'm a bit concerned about those sorts of informations going out. So things like your date of birth, your credit card information, your address, your mother's maiden name, for example. So those sorts of information. Yeah.
And indeed, we should all be concerned because I hate to say this. Thanks, by the way, Wallace. We cannot stop those things from happening, but we can at least make it difficult for the bad guys to do the bad stuff, and that is exactly what security is about, right? There's no such thing as no 100% security. Like you don't have that, you know, because there's always going to be an element of risk to what you do. Otherwise, why pursue it, right? But you know, as a cybersecurity consultant, what we try to do is to make it as hard as possible for the bad guys to do the bad stuff, and hopefully demotivate them in the process, right? So. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about today is really knowing what to do from an individual perspective. It's about an individual responsibility, right? We cannot leave privacy and some of the things we're talking about to the corporates, because that is not necessarily their motivation, right? Their motivation is about the bottom line. You know, that's not their business model. But you and I do understand that if we take personal responsibility, then at least we're doing something to be able to protect ourselves, right? Cool. So everything you've said about privacy is 100% correct, and just a bit of like we've talked about confidentiality, which is cool. Is it okay if I sit? Because I hate to make this a lecture. Let's just talk, right? Let's just have a conversation. So it's really about keeping our personal information safe, and just a little bit of nuance there, because in some contexts you hear personal identifiable information. But in New Zealand, it's actually, and the Privacy Act is actually personal information, because it doesn't have to be identifiable before it is personal, right? So on face value, it doesn't have to be identifiable. So what I mean is, if you have your name, for instance, it's still personal to you, it's still personal information. But if you add your address to it, it becomes identifiable because it identifies you, your name, and where you stay, right? So, but if you have these two separate data sets, it's still personal information, and therefore you still have to be able to protect it. Because in the hands of the bad guys, they can put two and two together and actually make out who you are. So a little bit of nuance there. In some jurisdiction, it has to be personal, it has to be identifiable first before it is protected. But in New Zealand, it's the other way around. Okay, so it's really just ensuring that PIs are protected and confidentiality is met. So privacy enables you to be in control of your information, and that is really what I want to emphasize today. It's about your control and how you enforce that control, right? Awareness, control, enforcement. Because it's not enough to know, but you also have to know what controls that what is in your control, what you can do, the actions you can put in place. But that is in itself is not even enough, you know, until you actually take the steps to enforcing those controls and demanding that your personal rights be met. Otherwise, people will always do what they would to circumvent your privacy. So privacy enables you to be in control of your information. Just to be a bit cynical there, but for the most part, right? Because I've got to be honest, right? Like I said, there's no such thing as no risk or no, 100% security, because it's always going to be, in this field in cybersecurity, it's more like a cat and mice game. It's about who is outsmarting the other, because a lot of some people, a lot there, they've got sort of the motivation to be able to do bad stuff. Like it's profitable. Doing bad stuff in this space is profitable. So it's about, sometimes it's about playing catch up, right? Especially if you're in government, unfortunately, where we don't have sort of the deep pockets to be able to, put all of those controls in place. Or it's not necessarily, we don't necessarily have the motivation to, because if you look at providing sort of services to citizens, you need a lot of information, right? It's about the service delivery. It's not first and foremost about, well, let's protect your privacy. So that is not necessarily the first motivation or the driver. But I haven't been in government for a while now, and because of some things like the Privacy Act coming into place, the conversation is changing. People are now more aware of what needs to be done, even from a government perspective. Like, I've been on projects where privacy is a big thing. Like, they have to design for privacy. And a lot of what I do in my day job is really helping projects and helping people to be able to make those privacy decisions by default, rather than having to think about it at the end. So understanding the privacy rights enables you to enforce your control. And you can enforce your control in many ways. So there's a law, which is the Privacy Act, as one of them. And you could also do that by maintaining a light digital footprint. I know that it's a hard sell. It's a hard thing to do these days because we've got thousands of apps there, doing all sorts of stuff. And if you actually look behind the scenes of what those applications or apps are doing, you'll be amazed, right? Because again, like I said something earlier, that their business model is getting as much information as they can from you, because that's how they make their money, right? So you have to then, take some steps to be able to stop that. And of course, awareness as well, because awareness is not just for us. When you're aware, when you're educated, you're able to then pass on the knowledge. And so for us that have come out here today, it's about understanding that and also passing the knowledge to others as well. Cool. Any comments, thoughts, questions so far? The next couple of slides is going to be very boring, so I'm going to try my best to skip through and explain at a very high level. But the Privacy Act became a thing 2-3 years ago now, and initially, and this was a response to the GDPR, so the European sort of equivalent of our New Zealand Privacy Act, where they came up with hefty fines for large corporates who were sort of not adhering to privacy principles, or I'm sure you would have heard in the news where the likes of Facebook or some of those big corporates get heaps of fines because people's information get leaked. So in New Zealand, we needed to sort of respond to that and say, okay, how do we want to achieve privacy, or look at this? So there was an update to the Privacy Act. And so really around 4 things there. One, when your information is being collected, right? When your information is being collected, and it's about how organizations and businesses can collect, store, use, and share your information. So the Privacy Act covers all of that. It's not just about protecting your information, but it's even how that information is collected in the first place, right? It's about how it's been stored. It's about how it's been used. It's also about how it's being shared. So the Privacy Act ensures that when your information is being collected, your information is used and shared appropriately, your information is kept safe and secure, and you can get access to your information. The last one there is a big one, because not everybody knows that, right? That you can actually walk to MSD and say, give me everything you have about me. Yeah, the Privacy Act does back you, And so for us, as we're developing systems, we're thinking about, okay, how do we make it easy for someone who wants to know all the information we hold about that person? If you work in IT, you know that it's sort of sometimes it's almost impossible, because you have the information going all around the place, right? You collect information on one end, but it's talking to this system, to the other system, and God knows where. There's an information flow, an information flow going all over the place. And so companies or organizations need to think carefully how they actually architect their IT systems to ensure that there's lineage, there's traceability, there's transparency. As your information comes through, it's transparent on the life cycle of that information is transparent as it touches all other systems, such that if you want to request for your information, or if you want to correct your information, it's easy for them to be able to do that. that is, yes, easier said than done. Yes.
Sorry, I have a question, and it might be quite silly. But how does the Privacy Act New Zealand interact with international organisations that might be collecting our information?
Yes. So ideally, if you're yes. So if you're an international organisation and you're domiciled in New Zealand, you're expected to abide to the New Zealand Privacy Act. If you're domiciled here, you know. But if you're an EU company, I think then the European the GDPR, which is I've forgotten the acronym now, but you can look it up. General Data Protection Regulation or something like that covers, you know. But the trick about your question is the enforcement. So if you're, let's say, Facebook operating in New Zealand, right? Well, you're not headquartered in New Zealand, but you do have a presence in New Zealand. So therefore, you're expected to abide by the New Zealand Privacy Act. The enforcement becomes the issue because how then do we enforce it for organizations that are not, we begin to get into the legal stuff, you know? Because as you'll soon say, it's not about just the act, it's about your ability to actually enforce it, you know? And so it becomes very tricky. So most times you would expect some good faith from those agencies and those companies to say, well, if you're operating in a jurisdiction, you've got to understand what the laws of that jurisdiction are, and you've got to do your best to be able to abide by those rules. Same thing with the wider cybersecurity space, because we also have some regulations and some international, regulations to abide by. Still the same principle as well. And yes, don't get me started on the enforcement bit, because I think this is where the GDPR, the European version, actually does, because they are not afraid to sort of hit 50 fines on you. They can, there's been examples or instances where they've had tens of thousands or millions on some of those big corporates because they can do it.
I was just wanting to add to what you said. I think the enforcement is what will be very tricky, though not in relation to the Privacy Act. I think some days ago I read in News and Stuff about someone who drove and had an accident with another person, and that person was seriously injured, and then the man who did this traveled out of New Zealand, and then the case went to court, and then the court ruled that even if they rule on this case, how are they going to enforce it when the person involved is not within our jurisdiction? So I think it's very similar to what he was trying to say. Is about how do you enforce it when it's not within New Zealand's jurisdiction? And that links me to the question I want to ask you, which is about, you talked about we could ask for this data, for example, MSD. Can we ask immigration for all of our data, all of what they hold about us?
Yes. That's what the Privacy Act, you're right, as a New Zealand citizen or as someone who is domiciled here, you can. Just the way you can also use the OIA Official Information Act as well to ask any question. But whether or not you will get the response you're looking for is a different ball game. But that is within your right indeed. So let's move quickly. Privacy principles. So the Privacy Act is underpinned by some principles, and I think there are 13 of them, on the whole. I'm not going to go through all of them, in detail, but just when you do have the time, just jump on privacy.org.nz and .gov.nz and have a look. It's got some really good information there that is good for us to actually have in our back pocket. So the Privacy Act has 13 privacy principles which governs how businesses should collect, store, use, and share your information, and also underpins the privacy by design principles, which I've talked about earlier. The first principle there is the purpose of collection. So in a nutshell, if someone wants to collect your data, they should tell you why they're collecting your data, right? And I'm not sure if you noticed when you were asking me to fill, I'm talking about Kendiel now? Is it Kendiel? Yes. She was asking me to fill a form earlier on, and I was like, what for? You know? Yes, so that's a nice way to always ask. You know, if someone wants to knock on your door and say, well, I'm from census, right? You know, well, you do know that that information is collected for census, so at least you know, right? But it's always good to ask, you know, why are you collecting this information, you know? And why are you collecting, you know, because when you understand the purpose for why the information is collected, you can then judge if they are over collecting your information. Like if they don't need to know your phone number, why should I get your phone number in the first place, right? So always do that. The source of information collected from the individual. So it's best to collect the information from the primary participant. So if I want to know something about ACCLI, I should go to ACCLI to find out. I shouldn't be going to Wallace to find out, right? Because then I'm enabling ACCLI to sort of you know, enforce his rights, whether or not he wants to provide that information for me, you know. But Wallace might not know that. Wallace might not know if ACCLI wants to be able to pass on that information. So, I'm sure you're already thinking about some of these corporates, right? They know stuff about you that you didn't necessarily give to them, right? It's a bit sneaky. So what to tell the individual about information? There are rules and guidelines about the information that has to be made available to you before your information is collected. A lot of that is the privacy notice, right? You do read some when you're signing up for some stuff that, well, by the way, this is how your information is collected, is stored, and all of that. So when you do read the fine print, which I know most people don't, it tells you all sort of things. And sometimes it's a bit sneaky because, you know, that's what we do. That's what I do for a job, right? Sometimes, you know, some of the things that is embedded in the fine print, we have to get the legal guys involved. I'm like, you know, I'm not sure about this third-party software you're about to purchase. Did you know that your information is going to be used for some sort of marketing, whatnot, and it's going to traverse the whole universe before coming back to New Zealand? So it's always good to read the fine print, even though, yes, I admit that we always don't, including myself. Yes, sir.
Right, so there are some instances where you don't have a choice.
Yes.
Like online, you want to install Microsoft,
yes,
Windows.
Yes.
You need, there is no way you cannot do without it.
Yes.
And at the end, if it says accept or
yes,
don't accept,
yes,
you don't have a choice, do
yes,
you? So there's no point in reading that whole thing.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. And the concern you put in is in two ways. So one, there's the public, you know, government agency side of things, and the other is the corporate, right? Because what happens is, if you're really designing a system for privacy, you shouldn't. When people make a choice to supply certain information or not, their experience or their usage of the system shouldn't be diminished by that choice, ideally. So if I said, well, I don't want my stuff to be passed on to marketing agencies, it shouldn't stop me from proceeding to use at least most of the features of that application, right? But in some cases, it's not. Like you said, you don't have a choice. So this is where it's important for you to know if you're signing up to some sites or some social media or whatever, and you're not given the ability to make a choice that is being followed through, it's just on face value because they just want to do that to show that you're taking your privacy seriously. But if you're not given, you know, if your experience has been diminished by the fact that you're actually enforcing your privacy, then you might think twice about using that platform or using that service. And there might be other sort of services around that you could use. I'll get to you in a minute. But it's tricky when it comes to government agencies because you don't have to MS this, right? You can't say, well, I don't like the way this MSD is treating me, I'm going to go to the other MSD. You don't have that. You don't have two IRDs. So that's why from a public or sort of service delivery government perspective, it's very important that we try our best to adhere to these principles, because the public is trusting us with this information, and we've got to do our best to ensure that we follow through with their privacy enforcement. Yes?
Bonnie, can you perhaps give us as parents some kind of advice, on how to manage online safety at home for our children?
Yes, I will come to that in a bit, and that's part of what we're going to discuss as well. But really wanted to give us this foundational stuff to be able to start up with, and mostly because we're talking about the Privacy Act here, and not everyone actually understands some of the details in the Privacy Act. So definitely we will come to that. Yes.
So mine is not a question, but a contribution in respect to if you want to sign up to maybe an app or something where you absolutely need it, you know very well that it doesn't matter what they put out there, you still need to sign up to it. And as regards whether we should read the terms, the T and O of the privacy information they have there or not, I think my thought is that it's always good to read it. And the reason why I'm saying it's good to read is because there are some applications you want to actually sign up to. You may have experienced where you will be told that, let's say, the first 1 month is free.
Yeah.
And then while you're trying to sign up, they will not ask you for your credit card details. If you don't read, you might not have an understanding of why do they need my credit card details when it is free.
Yeah.
But when you now read, you will now see them say to you, if you unsubscribe, let's say prior to the end of your free period, then you will not have to pay for it. And it may be that the only use of it, the need of it was just for like a week. So being that you've read to go down to that level, it now helps you to know that, before the end of the 1 month free X or Y, I need to unsubscribe for it, else I will be charged for it. But if you don't read to this level, you may just sign up for it, assuming that you have to pay for it and keep paying for it. So it's always good to read those terms and conditions, though there are times where a bulk of it is not important. It's things that may not make sense, but there's going to be one clause that might help to inform whether you would go ahead with staying on that platform or not.
Yeah, and the thing about
this idea is like they all like long as.
Yeah, it's always a long term condition.
Whose idea? Those companies, whoever wrote these terms and conditions, they just discourage you from reading. I love reading, but they are a lot.
Yeah, of course. It's a psychological thing as well, because if they make it that way, people are not going to bother to read. But all good. Well, like you said, which is true. That if you know what to look for, you will know where to find what you're looking for. Right? So it's just about what is the thing you want to take seriously, right? So like I said, there's been some experiences where a government agency wants to sign up for a particular service, and oh my gosh, if you take the time to read the terms and conditions, you will want to talk to your legal people very quickly, right? This is not just about privacy now. It's about, well, look, we've got to think about this carefully. Let's move quickly. So the manner of collection and how the information is actually being collected also matters, right? And the storage and security of information. I think that's the bit where it has to do with the actual ensuring that the information is confidential, right? Keeping it in safe systems, ensuring things like, good access management practices, not just system level, but, people level as well, right? So ensuring that, the system is not sort of speaking to, some of the sneaky systems out there that are outside of your control. And this is from a government sort of project, perspective. But if you're signing up to some of these large corporates, you don't actually have control over all of that. But the fact that that is not the issue though. The issue now is if you are aware of what to do, then you have a choice whether or not you want to sign up or to what level you want to put out your information, right? And then you can begin to take those things seriously, because that might not be your only control. So I'm going to just skip past all of these principles Principle 6 there is about providing access to information, like I've talked about this earlier on, is that you do have the ability to, and the right actually, to request for your information. And Principle 7 there is about correction of personal information. So, and this is serious because a lot of people allow their data or information to be stilled. Let's say you came into this country, for instance, and there were certain things that applied to you 10 years ago, but that no longer apply to you now, But if you don't go back and correct all of that, or at least update those things, the system still sees you as someone who is, someone who came into the country 10 years ago. And that is what will be used to sort of assess you, to make judgments, right? And this becomes very important in the age of sort of, AIs and all those things, because a lot of this information is what is being used to build models about people, or build profiles about people, right? So so you should take this thing seriously, right? So things like going back to the banks and ensuring that you've changed your address, some of all those tiny little things, ensuring that your IRD numbers are all correct and all of that. You might not see the importance of it, but in the grand scheme of things, if someone wants to build a profile about you, it becomes very important. Yes, so ensure that accuracy before using information. Now, this is on the side of sort of government now, or people who use your information. It's important that they, to the best of their ability, ensure that they're using the most appropriate, the most correct, up-to-date information about you, to be able to make those assessments. So that's the reason why sometimes when you bring up a service, they will say, oh, by the way, now that I've got you on the phone, are you still in this address? They try to walk through some of those important information just to ensure that your information is kept up to date. Principle 9 is interesting because we love to keep stuff, right? Especially as IT people, right? Oh, I'm gonna need it 10 years down the line. But if you don't actually need it, the more you keep stuff, the more the burden of accountability or something, to be able to ensure that the stuff is safe, right? So the sort of, I don't want to go into all of that, but there's the official, the Public Record Act, and there's a lot of other laws and acts there that stipulates the length to which personal information can be kept or should be kept. But what I do from a practical perspective is to ensure that we build our systems in such a way that we can press the delete button, right? And not just the delete button, but ensuring that when we press the delete button, when we hit the delete button, it's actually deleted, right? Because you'll be amazed how, especially in the current climate of cloud and all of the fancy technology out there, deleting information doesn't necessarily mean it's gone. It just means that maybe perhaps you're not seeing it, but it's probably kept somewhere in archive or backup, or it has gone somewhere around the globe. So it's really just taking that extra due care. And this is where the roles of cybersecurity or privacy professionals come in, because we try to hold people to account to say, show me that you've actually, or you do have the ability to actually delete someone's information. And you do have the right, by the way, to say, I want that information deleted. Let me nuance that a little bit, because you can't just walk to IRD and say, I want my IRD records to be deleted. That's not possible, right? You wish you could do that. But at least you do have some leeway as to what information you need to be corrected or you need to be deleted. And of course, the use of personal information. Now, there's what you call secondary use, which is a sort of very interesting, Yes.
Commissioner office because I wanted to delete my daughter's pictures which were on her Facebook, and because she didn't consent, I felt uncomfortable having on the Facebook page which was advertising a community event with the raising fund for some kind of group.
Yeah.
So I went there and I requested if they could remove her image. But they told me your daughter seemed to be happy and she was smiling. Yes.
But she didn't know.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we contacted the Facebook, and then we contacted NetSafe, and then they all did not respond or did nothing. And at the end, I contacted the people who put her there, and they resolved. But yeah, it was interesting that they said she wrote okay. And
I'm just trying to wonder how old is she?
She was 17 at that time, and because her being underage and there was no written consent, and me being the parent, I was uncomfortable with the issue.
Yeah, we're going to touch on the issue of sort of over collection and ensuring. I mean, we've talked about it, earlier on, but we'll touch more after the break. We're going to break now in about a minute, but I'll just run through the remaining principles. Disclosing personal information, you need to know the right. You need to give consent for your personal information to be disclosed. We talked about that earlier. And the other two is just some technical principles that have to do with disclosure outside of New Zealand, to touch on some of what you've talked about earlier, and unique identifiers. The unique identifiers one day is a bit of it's a tricky one, because what you're saying is, especially in the system side of things, not behind the scenes. Right, this is the IT people now. There's some records that tell somebody that this is the person I'm talking about, without necessarily saying this is the person I'm talking about. So those identifiers has to also be treated and kept well, because it's about putting the strings together, and someone can know that, well, this is this person from this sort of community and all of that. So that's important. Right. So when we I think we're having a water break.
10-minute break.
10 minutes break.
We go downstairs if anybody wants something other than water. We have water up here, but we sell all types of beverages.
Okay, thank you so much. So take a 10 minutes,
please.
10 minutes break, and when we return, we'll go into the practical case, and then we have some discussions around.
Sorry to ask, is the tea downstairs free? Is the tea downstairs free?
No, it's not free. Sorry.
It's a coffee shop now.
I'm just kidding.
We're going to have it collectively.
Dozens of these examples out there, and like I said, everything I'm going to say here is all in the public domain, so you can look this up by yourself. And the reason I'm stressing that is because none of this is confidential, right? It's all in the public domain, so you can look this up yourself. We'll just quickly go through the MCH1, Ministry of Culture and Heritage, because that was big in the news, and it's something that is an example of a collection, if you ask me, and we're going to go through it very quickly. But we're also going to have a discussion, right? Because I want us to get to the point of what do we do? How do we keep ourselves safe? And most importantly, how do we keep our dependents and people that we look after, how do we actually pass on this knowledge to them as well? So, anybody works for the Ministry of Culture and Heritage here? No? Yeah, so, okay, my apologies. Yes, well, this was a big thing, right? So this happened around about, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, right? I'm not going to read all of that, but essentially what happened is, I think I do have, cool, so key facts, right? So 302 people were affected by a major security breach. So what had happened is, people signed up for a voyage, put up their information there, and surprise, surprise, it ended up in a third party, with the third party and all of that. And so there were a lot of people affected. Now, 302 people, 373 separate documents were compromised, including that of young people. And so there's a breakdown. The documents compromised include 228 passports, 55 driver's licenses, 36 birth certificates, and so on and so forth, right? And I did underline the last sentence there, because sometimes we think that this breach only happen when someone malicious is at the other end of the line, right? But we don't think about it as sometimes too, it might just be, lack of due diligence on our side, which is really what I want to emphasize here today. So this was rather an opportunistic find of information that wasn't secure as it should be, right? So the information that was on the site, by the way, the site is just the front end. The website is just the front end. You put in the information there, it goes into a database somewhere, right? So probably that wasn't kept as secure as it should be. And, someone was able to, make a find of it. Now, this is a little bit more technical, but I'm not going to go into it. So what I tried to do in this slide is to look at that case and say, what went wrong from a privacy principle perspective, right? And we probably can just read through very quickly. So the first one there, the purpose of collection, so if you go through, let me go through that again, and if you highlight how many documents were there, so passports, driver's licenses, birth certificates, and so forth, on and so forth, right? Why did they need all of that information, right? If you're signing up to something, do you actually need to give all of that information, or maybe just one of it? I could understand that not everyone would have, form of identification could range from different things, right? But this is a typical example of, well, maybe we need to actually think about how we are collecting information and what is the purpose of information. Because over collection is a thing, right? And it's true. If you think about your workplace now, you're probably over collecting information because you think you're going to need it sometime, right? You're over collecting your staff information, you're over collecting, or you're over giving your personal information. And what happens is that if that information gets breached, then it means that a whole lot of information that shouldn't be out there is now out there, and that becomes makes it a bit more tricky. Now, what was the purpose of the information? So IPP3, what did they tell the individual about it? So the individual was clearly informed on how their information will be stored and used or shared. I suppose if you collect information from ACCLE, you wouldn't be telling them, ACCLE, well, by the way, we're not going to securely store your information. ACCLE will be very uncomfortable to share its information in the first place, right? The privacy notice the Privacy Act does, like we've said, stipulates that we should tell people how the information will be stored. Now, when you read the fine print of what I call the privacy notice, if you're dealing with government agencies or any corporate out there, the first thing you see, you pop in your website, the privacy notice, right? Or a cookie notice, whatnot, right? So in there, as you read through, they will tell you, well, this is how your information is securely stored. Well, they might not go into the technical details, but at least there's an appearance of, we are looking after your information correctly, right? That is actually very important because if it comes to illegal stuff, you could actually use that against them to say, well, I gave you this on the basis that you're going to, protect my information, but maybe you didn't, right? So a privacy notice underpinned by agencies' privacy policies is very important. Now, I don't want to go into the details of all of that, but if you have a privacy notice, you should actually have a privacy policy because your privacy notice is nothing without a privacy policy. And the privacy policy is actually how you do privacy in the agency. And that is why you have the big agencies who always have a privacy policy. Your agency has one. And it's incumbent on the privacy officers to ensure that their privacy notices are kept up to date and it adheres to all of the privacy principles, right? And it's all about giving you helping you to make an informed consent. Because it's not just about consent though. What are you consenting to, right? You've got to know, you've got to understand. And like customer was saying the other time, is if you're not comfortable with that, what are your options, right? What are your options? If there are no options, then you've got to think about it. But you're going into it being informed that, by the way, I don't have any options. And then probably you'll be more careful how you sort of present yourself or share your information. But if you do have options, then you could explore what those options are. A good example would be the issue of consent and authorization. It's almost the same thing, but there's a slight nuance and slight difference. Sometimes when we mean consent, we actually mean authorization. Because by nature of consent, it means that you should be given the opportunity to withdraw consent. So if you give your consent today that, I want my information to be collected, and then tomorrow you change your mind, you should be able to withdraw consent, right? But most often than not, especially in the public sector, we say consent, but what we mean is authorization. Because it means you're authorizing me to use your information, and by the way, this authorization stands until, so you cannot go, like I said, you can't go to IRD and say, okay, can you just stop using my tax information? You can't do that. Because once you authorize them to use your information, you have given them that authorization, and they're backed by law. Therefore, at the point of giving that information, it's very important that you're fully aware of what information you're giving. Does that make sense? Cool. So I'm going to skip through all of that. So obviously, like we said, it wasn't stored correctly. There were issues around, encryption, security controls, encryption, access management, privacy assessments, and all of that. We tried to get some of the projects I've worked on, a lot of the projects I've worked on, we try to get the projects to do privacy impact assessment, and that's because it's really just looking at the risk around privacy, right? So ensuring that is baked in, into the system design, right? And ensuring that all of that is important. And of course, the use of personal information. Why should all of that information be on the website in the first place? Right? I'm sure you're thinking about your own workplaces now, like, oh, should that information be there, or should it be kept separately, or and if you begin to think about the privacy by design and the technical implementation of all of these principles, we begin to do things like abstraction, minimization, separation. If you were collecting something about a refugee, some information that has to do with refugee, should we be keeping that information together with another information that has to do with the address or something or whatever? So we've got to think about how we architect the system to be able to ensure that privacy is adhered to at that level, that fundamental level, right? So this is where, in my day-to-day job, I would be looking at, challenging some of the architects out there to say, well, this information, shouldn't we keep it separately? Or shouldn't, why is it talking to another database, and by the way, once two systems are talking, it means that you've increased the risk landscape, right? So it means that the attack surface, rather. So it means that, you've just made it easier for the bad guys to be able to have access to it. And by the way, the bad guys is not just some bloke sitting somewhere, across the ditch. It might actually be a disgruntled staff. It might actually be someone who is overworked. It might actually be someone who, is a newbie and doesn't actually know what you're doing. So we've got to be able to think about all of this holistically. Cool. So sorry that I had to rush through all of that, but so this is just an example of, I know we're talking about, Sarah and I were talking about some of these big corporates, and you already know all of this, so this is just putting it into context. Now, if you Google, you go to that website there, they've got ranked the 15 biggest data breaches that has happened to date, and the impact, right? So 3 billion accounts, 1.1 billion users, and this is information about people going all over the place, Yes, it's scary. It's absolutely scary. And did you notice something that is sort of common among, I only put 5 of them there. A lot of those sites has to do with social networking or social commerce or whatnot, right? Because fundamentally, remember what I said when we started? Business model, right? Their business model is to get as much information from you as possible, because that is how they make the connections. That is how they train their algorithms, their whatnot, their AI, right? To be able to, say, by the way, you bought something from Zara last week, there's something else happening here. Do you want to check this out? And you're thinking it's creepy. It's not creepy, because if they knew that you probably walked into that store after you purchased that stuff from Zara, right? Yeah. Yes.
Just one thing to point out. The LinkedIn, is it 700 or 700 million?
Oh, sorry, 700 million, I suppose.
Okay,
yeah.
So the real question is, what happens after your information has been stolen, exposed, or whatever? What are your rights there? Can you sue the company? Can you get some money out of it?
Yes, and it's something we were talking to Sarah earlier on. It's a bit tricky, because the bit of enforcement, it's really tricky. It depends on what jurisdiction you are, right? In New Zealand, I don't know yet that we've had a big class action against a company. The only teeth we've got is the Privacy Act, and it's about the privacy commissioner putting those fines and saying, by the way, you've got to do this. But you can take them to court, of course. You can seek legal action. You can seek compensation. You can do all of that. If you're in the US though, you would love this kind of things because then everybody is suing everybody, right? It's about who gets to the court first, right? And so some of these companies, they've got deep pockets. They're sort of used to some of these things. So I'm sure they put some money by the side to say, well, when we get sued, we would probably make it go away. But yeah, in such jurisdiction, people are more aware of their personal rights, and that's because of how the legal system is structured. Our privacy principle does stipulate a $10,000 fine if you do not report a privacy breach. So let's say a privacy breach occurs and there's a particular, I think, 48 hours, or I have to double check that. If you do not report that breach, then you can be liable to pay a fine of $10,000. But what happens after that? I really don't know. It's yeah.
And just to add to that, because I think on Thursday the government signed a new bill that restricts us from paying money to people who have come to steal our data. What I mean is there are some persons online that will come to steal this data, and then in the past they'll ask you to pay money. That once you now pay money, they will clean they will clean off the data they've stolen on the net. But I think on Thursday there is a new bill that has been passed that says if someone steals this data, you need to report to a fortune, the commissioner for something that has to do with what you've just mentioned about the fine. And the privacy commissioner. And then they've also said that they've now put in law that you shouldn't pay them any money, just so that they will clean your data. And then why they've put that law is because in previous experiences, there is no track record to show that even after you've paid money, they will clean off your data or get it back to you. They will continue to hunt you, and you continue to pay and pay. So the government has put a stop on it, that no organization or X or Y should pay money for such things. And I think they've even put a fine that for an individual, from the top of my head, found that they stole your data and you go pay money for it. I think a fine of about $100,000 for an individual, and I think $100 million for a company. From the top of my head.
The person who's being fined, the person.
So this is about ransom. Yeah.
Ransom.
So this is about ransom, right? So there's been conversations, and by the way, it's an ongoing conversation, right? Because the reason why the government, and this is not just New Zealand government, this is almost all governments out there. On the face of it, they will say, "Well, we don't pay ransoms. We don't engage with that. You know, it's like terrorists, right? We don't negotiate with terrorists."
Yeah.
And that is true, and that should, because it demotivates the bad guys from doing. Otherwise, you're giving them financial incentives, right, to do that. But we don't know what happens behind the scenes, and I'm just gonna say it at that point and leave it there. But the other thing, though, is about trust, right? So the guy who stole your data, do you trust him to return it to you when you pay? So trust is what has been fundamentally broken. So if a financial remuneration or financial incentive is not gonna restore trust. You're not gonna buy the trust back. So it's about we can't go past that issue of trust. And like I said too, you just incentivize bad behavior. Right? Cool. Right. This is the most important bit. So all of that I've given you is really two things. Is to, awareness of what privacy is, and to also let you know that the Privacy Act is a thing. Take it seriously, right? Because, to be honest, that is probably the legislation that backs you up, right? I work in cyber, and privacy is probably the only act that we have now that does have some sort of enforcement to it, an enforcement in quote, because of the fines and because of obviously the reputational damage and all of that. So if we want to get people to do the right thing, we actually come through privacy. We use, the Privacy Act as a stake, right? So it's important that you know that. And in your organizations, you should be looking out for this. How you are adhering to the Privacy Act. But this is now talking about on a personal level, what do we do, right? So I wanted to talk about 3 broad areas, right? Awareness, which we've sort of talked about. Control comes from awareness. Now you know what you can or what you can't do. For example, for instance, you do know now that you can correct your information. You do know now that you can actually ask for your information. Tell me what you have about me, right? And but the most important thing is then how do we enforce it? It's about enforcement. How do we demand that our rights, our privacy rights, be respected? And I think that will be an ongoing conversation. So you're going to help me out, right? And we're going to break into groups, right? This is where I'm probably a bit lazy to give you the solution. So let's talk about it, right? Privacy awareness. How do we I know we've talked about this before, but what I want us to talk about in our groups is how do we sort of continuously keep abreast with what is happening, and then how do we pass this on to our kids and our children and people who are our dependents, our co-workers, right? How do we continuously create this space of awareness? And privacy control, how do we then ensure that what we know is being put into practice? And not just that, then how do we follow through to be able to enforce it, right? So in your groups, if you just want to talk among yourselves, give you 5-10 minutes, and then we can have an anchor person.
Just to find out, are we splitting into 3 groups?
I thought about splitting, but maybe we can just have a go, right? It's just going to be bullet points, right? So just have a go about all 3, or just focus on one or 2 if you like, right? You've got post-it notes on your seats as well, so feel free to just have a wee bit of discussion. And then we're just going to walk through some of the ideas that have come through, and then we're going to wrap up.
Do you want to join this group?
Sounds good? Oh, okay. All right. Cool. Looks like we have 3 groups. Yeah.
So, 3 groups.
Okay. So now that we have 3 groups, I think maybe we'll just focus, because we have limited time, maybe we'll just focus on one group. So group 1, do you want to talk about awareness? What I'm looking for is how then do we sort of ensure that we have that continuous flow of awareness? How can we make that important for our kids and our dependents? So it's not just general awareness, but how do we then put that into practice? Group 2, I think we have 3 groups.
What do you guys think?
So do you want to do privacy control?
It's sustainable. I think that's what it's trying to say. Awareness.
This group, do you want to do
for example,
privacy enforcement?
we are all coming together and we know African Association.
I think you know that this is your show.
It's very many.
Because sometimes I always feel uncomfortable on websites they ask and then at the end the option is decline accept.
Yeah.
You know,
And if you decline, then
you can go further. Just like you go.
Things are accept or accept, like sometimes. Yeah.
But control of the information that we have already given, that's the thing. How do you control?
maybe you need to know information. Maybe you need to know what do you give. I mean, I'm the different anyway.
Yeah.
We always give information.
Yeah, man. Any you don't even know who has got your information.
Whether they're passing it on to somebody.
Yeah, it's really hard to know.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of what is like the spreading out the information. So making information like accessible or like.
It's a hard one. I think that's the big one. It's about privacy enforcement. Privacy enforcement.
Privacy enforcement.
Yeah, privacy enforcement.
Should we look at social media because that's where we can relate and how to protect our identity?
Yeah, what you can do. So what's your point?
How do you then understand? Look, if you're going to jump on a site, this is what you need to do.
So you can have like the 3 words, so why, what, who, like why you're reading it, what it is, and who you're performing, like
Okay, link it to
won't be social media. You can't be posting.
Okay, link it to the fewest number of other platforms.
Oh yeah.
Like, don't let it link you to other. What one?
Do we choose that? What it does?
Yeah, like if it's that one platform, it should just be that one, not linked to your other all other
The way
platforms.
Facebook and Instagram connect. If
Yeah,
you
and
upload in Facebook. It's
and other apps also, other apps you can log in via Facebook. You know
Oh,
how
yeah.
like it tells you log in, yeah, or Gmail, like all other things are connected to that one platform. Kind of.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right, what are the words?
Low, what did you
Less
say? Low.
Alright, can we 5 more minutes and then we continue.
But now the ultimate question here, and me, I'm going to talk as from the perspective of a former refugee. You see, this stuff here, somebody went to school, can speak English, they kind of make sense, although they are as clear as mud, that's what I'm saying, you know? They are clear, but it's mud. We can't really understand. Now just put yourself into the shoes of this former refugee woman who probably never went to school. You know, how, apart from just using maybe Facebook, or you know, there's a bit of email and stuff, you know, my knowledge about this thing is almost close to zero. Just like if you would ask me to tell you about tax, the way the tax works, I don't know if anybody in the world understands, even themselves. You know, so do you understand? Because this is a community thing. You know, so the most vulnerable are how do we communicate? These parents, how are they gonna do?
So I've just put there like
there's a barrier of language, there's a barrier of not being educated, even this so-called educated. I don't understand shit.
So I've just put down the ways of
3 more
trying to
minutes.
reach out to such a group of persons. Could be through a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Like through people, for example, understand and can relate.
Yeah. So we have to have those programs. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess part of it is another one is obviously, and it's quite big about this sort of thing of trying to provide services within language, people's own like native languages, right? There's just a thing of like, you know, certain, yeah, like, kind of like, I was looking at different workshops and they said, like, okay, talking about like completely different, talking about the treaty.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, cool, here's like 15 different languages that you can do this workshop in the treaty, or here's like a booklet of information, and it's that sort of thing. How do you get to that point when you say, okay, cool, here's, you know, the basics of the Privacy Act, and like, you know, what's your information being used for, who's collecting it, how it's stored.
Yeah, in that case, then maybe it's more of ACCW is an umbrella community to the likes of us who attended today. Can I be? I mean, I'm equipped. I'm being equipped here, but can I have the facility of, let's say, not everybody here, especially like you and Alma, and we just go and not hijack, but we just go talk to my community, those who are available, because you know life here is busy and stuff. Some people would like to be here, but they can't. But if I organize in my like go on this community, you know, especially those young graduates and stuff, we can have a place where you can come. Then from them they can go and tell the parents, and that's how communities can be informed. Because you're not gonna have this room full. In fact, if this room was full, it probably would be more noisy. So this is intimate, but can we be equipped? There's a Zambian here, so he can go, she can go to, you know?
All right, shall we begin to wrap up? And then maybe I'll go around the tables. Just nominate an anchor person to share with us what you guys have talked about.
The needs I've put, I think the first one is providing this knowledge through tools like
You just speak on behalf of the group, or me, I don't see any.
Sorry.
Or
I'm very fine.
Or you can speak on
talking about?
Oh, come on. What happened to equality? You're going to go complain later on.
The other group first. The other.
It felt cold, so I was like, said the comic code, there should be a place to hit up this. I think that's what she should be able to.
All right, thank you guys. Let's reconvene. Just looking at the time, so we've got to run quickly. Yes, cool. Thank you. I do hope you guys had some interesting chats. So let's start with group 1, please. Privacy awareness. What did you guys talk about? You've got 2 minutes.
Okay, I think in our group, we thought of a whole range of things. I think,
can we all hear each other? Yes. Just checking.
And I think one of the key things which my brother brought up was that is how can we designate what we've learned to a group of persons who may be refugees that may not have the type of knowledge that some of us in the room may have. And then I think the key things we picked up was trying to designate these through videos. It's possible to use infographics. It's possible to use models. It's possible to use to do a one-on-one session. Because, for example, when we talked about the refugee, they may not speak the same language with us, but if we have someone here who speaks a similar language to them, it's possible for them to have a one-on-one where they can relate at a level that they may understand the things we have learned here. And then I think in the wider point of this, we also looked at ways of creating awareness through seminars and the workshops, like what we are doing now, because this has been a great way for all of us here to learn as regards this. So this is just like a little summary of the ways we think it's possible for us to create awareness, trying to wear the cap of the different types of persons we may have within our association. I hope that was less than 2 minutes.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, yes, thanks. And I think one of the things I picked up there which was interesting is people who are who may not know their rights, who are disadvantaged in that sense. They're sort of new to the environment, new to the country. They're easy targets to be taken advantage of. Probably not from a government perspective, because government agencies, we try our best to eschew some of these values because the Privacy Act is ours. But you can tell that there's a couple of agencies or companies out there who want to pounce on the fact that we actually don't know some of these things we're talking about. So that was quite a good one. I could also, if I may add, that it's also about sort of walking through with our kids and our dependents as well at home, and just ensuring that they are aware that actually privacy is a thing. It might not be a thing in this generation, but it's become something that we have to be very aware of. How then do we sort of communicate these principles to our teenagers, for instance, or our young ones, and people who are sort of in our circle of influence as well. So thank you. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to provide some links that we can actually go to sort of know more about privacy. And incidentally, it's actually Privacy Week in about 1 or 2 weeks' time. So it's a good way to sort of let people know what is happening in that space as well. So thank you again, Group 1.
All topical.
Absolutely. Group 2.
All right, privacy control. Which is one of the takeaways from the Privacy Act. Always request information held about you, and also what it's used for. And then the next point was, when giving your names, just give necessary. Don't give all the information like which tribe and like that. Just give in necessary identifying information. And then the other one, this is about probably education at home, creating awareness in the family have open conversations with kids and family about these things, what information can be out there forever, especially around social media.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then another point was ensure that any publicly accessible information that you put out there is something that you are comfortable with.
Absolutely.
It's not something that you're gonna regret afterwards. And then the other one is protective law, legislation, being aware of the law, the legislation. Yeah, that's as far as we went.
Excellent point.
I'm sure there
really.
could be a bit more.
No, really, excellent points. And I think if we can actually follow through with all of those points, it's really a good way to sort of take back control, right?
Yeah.
And I do love the fact that you mentioned, only giving out necessary information. Because sometimes we think that if we don't give more, we're not going to get the service, Ideally, it's not, right? Because the more you give out, the more the burden, like I said, the burden of accountability is on the people to be able to, who is receiving the information, to be able to keep your information safe. So the practical things, I know this is your area, but I'm going to touch on it since you mentioned it, is things like filling a form, right? If you jump on a website and you see a form, there's a bunch of fields that are optional, right? I hate those because from a privacy by design perspective, they shouldn't be there in the first place. If they're optional, why put it there, right?
Especially the one about collecting your gender.
Exactly, right?
That's why they don't want to know.
Exactly, right?
And then they'll give you an option of any other information.
Yeah. And I was actually, good point to raise that. I was actually going to touch on that. So any other information is not necessary. If it's not, some of the most important fields that would usually put it, there's going to be an asterisk, right? Just fill that, that is all they need, right? And any other information box is a trap sometimes because you tell all your grandfather stories and all of that, and then at the end of the day, you're like, oh man, so it's usually not necessary, right? Yes, so free forms and optional columns are things you should always watch out for. On the other side of the fence, though, from a behind the scenes perspective, it's always like when we do things like people are designing systems and they put free columns and free text and all of that, it scares us because you don't know what someone is going to say, right? And we're always saying to them, look, do you actually need this column? Because if you don't, you're safer taking it away because someone might just go for it and tell you all sort of stories. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't, so things like that are things that you should actually be watching out for. There was something else you touched on that I wanted to touch on that that skipped me.
Open conversation?
Yes, open conversations, right? Sometimes it's good to challenge that. Sorry, just looking at the time there. If someone is to collect your information, just ask them, why? Why do you need this, right? Why do you need this? You're not being rude. You're well within your rights to be able to do that. And sometimes too, you might just as well discover that they don't even need that, right? So it's always important to sort of walk through that. All right. Thank you so much, Group 2. Thank you so much. All right. 2 minutes.
Come on, Group 3. I'm hungry.
The biggest group ever.
Okay.
Biggest group ever.
So our group discussed privacy enforcement, and we've got a few points here to enable that. So firstly, we looked at having a low digital footprint. Another point, review privacy settings and social media presence. Have a minimum identifiable information online when you're filling in forms and things. I think you touched on that earlier. Log off after using a public computer. So if you're in public setting, you wanted to make sure that you've logged off afterwards because someone else could access your information. And then consistently review your terms and conditions when you're signing up to new apps or social media platforms or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely, very, very good point. Absolutely, and I just want to stress on the low digital footprint. And we talked about this earlier on, right? It's about building a profile of you. Now, you don't have a control what profile is being put out there. You only have a control about the information you're putting out there, but someone can use that to build whatever profile they want, right? And we've seen this, like it happens, believe me, it happens, and once your information is out there, it's out there. You cannot, it's hard for you to call it back. You're depending on the good faith of other people to be able to, use it well or to be able to do the right thing. So it's important, just rethink your social media presence, rethink your digital footprint, right? It's now a thing. Do you actually need to be on TikTok, Instagram, and I know that there are legitimate reasons for doing that. I know, by the way, yes. I know I wasn't born in the 90s or in the 2000s, so probably would understand, but I'm sure that there's a lot of legitimate reasons for being on all of those platforms. But you can't trust none of them. Right? It's all about their business model. And it doesn't matter where they're domiciled. Whether it's a Chinese company or it's a US company and all of that, it's all about their bottom line. So if you're not absolutely in need of being across all of that, rethink that profile. I just shut down my Facebook. I just shut down my Facebook a couple of months ago because I'm like,
man, I'm not going to contact you again on Facebook.
The only thing I have now is Instagram, LinkedIn, and that's because there's something there I can use it for. What I was going to say, I'll let you talk, Sarah, but what I was going to also add very quickly is that the reason why you have to do that is because, again, the information you put out there fits into other things like AIs and machine learning and all these things that we're talking about. So it's very important that you take absolute control of that. Yes.
The question was, and I agree, yes, you need to keep a low digital footprint. However, what do we do when companies start to monopolize? And so Instagram and Facebook are the same organization, it's now Meta or whatever. So how do we protect ourselves in those instances where I imagine there's data sharing between Facebook and Instagram?
Well, you don't imagine, there's absolutely data sharing between Facebook and Instagram. And WhatsApp as well.
Sorry, that's the other one they own. So what do we do in those situations? You might decide that, you've gone off Facebook, but you're still on Instagram. So how do you protect yourself? How do we...
Exactly what you've said. Sometimes it's settings. Some of these apps now come with settings and, where your information can go to and whatnot. So even when I had my Facebook, and by the way, I'm not recommending that you shut down your social media site. That's not what I'm saying. When I had my Facebook, it was probably the most restrictive Facebook you can also find. So at some point, I was asking myself, what's the need? What's the point? Might as well, get off the thing. So yes, you could actually look at those settings. And by the way, those settings are not there forever, right? Sometimes when there's an update, it completely disables all of the settings. So you've got to keep an eye on all of those things continuously. And again, I know it's a difficult conversation to be had, but do you actually need to be across all of these platforms? It's another question to ask.
It also depends with your line of work. If you're someone who has to market your own business.
Yeah, I agree. If someone, that is, you've got a legitimate purpose while you're doing that. And so it's probably just for business. I can understand with that, and you want to use that too. But, like we're talking, a lot of people, believe me, I've been in a room, I'm not going to mention where, I've been in a room where a legitimate, I won't mention which people, we're showing how, by just social media, they can build a profile of you, even when you have a very low footprint. So if you have, let's say, you disable a lot of stuff and all of that, they could use your friends to this person. They could begin to use your profile as a way to actually understand who you are. It's scary out there. So I'm not saying that you should go off these platforms, but I'm saying that we should be absolutely be in the know of what we are doing all the time. Yes, sir.
So I think my question is just around the trade-off.
Yes.
So
I'm rounding up now.
All right. So as an expert, you've taken one measure by, getting off Facebook. Then I have a friend, so she's a banker. So to my surprise, a conversation came up, and I asked about internet banking, and she was like, "Oh, she doesn't use internet banking, but she is."
Banker.
a banker, somebody who is giving us this service.
Yes.
You know, and there are also
Bit of an
people.
irony, isn't it?
Yeah. So there are also experts who are into social media and other, who are giving us to consume this sort of services, but they are not using it themselves. So what's sort of the trade-off? How do we?
Two things, because one, well, from a personal perspective, it's about what you then stand to gain versus what you stand to lose. So if you're able to make that judgment by yourself, and you're still comfortable too, I mean, the merits might, outweigh the demerits. That's totally up to you, right? But you do so at least being informed. Like, of course, there are people, who run businesses on social media, and in fact, there's a thing called social commerce. That is an offshoot of social networking. And I don't have the time to go into all of that, but there's a whole commerce that is now as a result of the networking, right? That people have built a lot of money from, and a lot of companies out there doing all of that. But once you make that assessment yourself and you're comfortable, then go ahead, but you're informed. But the other side of things, of that though, is that is a reason why you find people in IT are actually also very skeptical. They're actually the last people to trust. Because they know how those things work behind the scenes. I was watching a video some months ago around someone asking the CEO of TikTok or something like that whether or not their child had TikTok. He said no. Why should they? Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In another life, I used to be a telecommunications engineer, and I'm very careful what I say over the phone because you never know who's listening.
Yeah, true.
Besides the person you're talking to, so it's very easy to listen in on any conversation. So.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe just something small. I came across something called eco surfing. It's something where you just Google your name and you'll be able to see all the information that is out there. So it's always something good to do from time to time.
Absolutely. Thanks for raising that. There are a lot of tools out there that helps us now to sort of stay aware and stay abreast of some of all these things. So use those tools, right? And just keep abreast. Privacy is not something we run away from. I mean, we are social beings, right? Let me just end by saying, as human beings, we connect, we interact. So in the cyberspace, in the technology space, it's just the technology internet has just given us a way to actually connect, right? So fundamentally, it is not the bad thing, it's not wrong. It's just about, even when, we're Africans here, so we are used to the concept of open door policy, we grow up, anyone is free to come in and all of that. But the reason why we do that is because we have a trust. There's something called trust amongst ourselves, right? So trust then becomes the capital by which we engage socially. So if you're not able to sort of understand or maintain or enforce that level of trust on the internet, then it's something that we have to think carefully. So thank you so much. Probably taking more time than necessary, I apologize, but I was going to end by saying that it's Privacy Week from 8th to 14th of May, and you've got some free learning resources there. The website of the Privacy Commission is also there, so I think it's privacy.gov.nz. And on that website, you can see a whole lot of resources, both from an individual level and for corporates and organizations as well. So I'm not going to say follow me on LinkedIn. My profiles are very boring. You probably won't see me posting anything there, but if you want to reach out, I'm more than happy to connect to you as well.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's been really, really good, and I'm now going to start thinking mine on social media again. Perfect. No, thank you everyone for coming out as well. Yeah, really glad everyone can make it out. It's pretty about ready, so if someone wants to go say a bit of a blessing before we dig into the food, feel free to do that. But no, thank you.
Are you not giving anybody some flowers?
For the great presentation.
What has it done to you?
Presentation, man. Not flower presentation. All the way from Paraparam.
I was waiting to take the picture as well.
No, No, thank you. Yeah, thank you for making the drive round.
Oh no, it's a privilege and it's been an honor. Thank you for listening to my boring presentation. I hope you took one or two things away from it.
It was good. I don't sit and listen to people for over an hour. Yeah, everybody will tell
My chief was already saying wrap up so he could go eat.
And cool, so hopefully next week we'll be back here again. I'm looking at supporting children through, looking at how to support kids through bullying. I think there's bullying.
I think we're going to have two speakers.
Two speakers.
One will just tell us about her experience.
Supporting children at home.
Yeah, home teaching, homeschooling, and the other person is going to talk about
mental health.
The divide between the New Zealand raised child and the parent from Africa, how to overcome those obstacles. One is Sabina and Denise.
And just to wonder, are these on a weekly basis? Is these meetings on a weekly basis or fortnightly?
Yeah, every Saturday.
For how long though?
So probably be from 12 to 2:30 or 12 to 12:30 to 3. For this week and next week, and then after that we're doing it reassessing again if here works or if Johnsonville works or what's the best venue and what's the best time for everybody.
Right, so we'll have this program throughout the year, is it? Or how many weeks?
7 more weeks.
7, yes.
6 more weeks after
this one.
man.
Let's see.
Just wanted to say we would like to serve the children first, so you would just stay calm.
Of course.
We're waiting for the important people.
Sounds good. Let's get it.
Bye-bye.